Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to bring back our previous friend of the channel, Cosi's Odyssey, to talk about a bit of a TikTok trend that has popped up in the last couple of weeks. And I'm not going to dwell on ceremony or anything like that. Here's Cosi.
We're just getting into it. We're getting
Just
stuck
getting
in.
into it. Exactly. Yep. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are, what you're about?
I
What's your deal?
what is my deal? Great question. So my name's Cosi and I run Cosi's Odyssey. And I'm an ancient historian and I'm starting my master's in a week, as I've just said to you. So starting my master's in a week, and my favorite thing is sort of gender and sexuality in the ancient world. That's kind of my bag, and body positivity and sex positivity, and how we can look to the ancient world as a way of understanding that and exploring that. And I do that through events and products and newsletter writing and a whole bunch of different things. So that's my deal.
I will have a whole bunch of links in the description so you can go and follow Cosi on all of her various related projects. So please go and make sure that you give her a follow. So today we are going to be talking about a recent TikTok trend, as you know. But for the people who maybe don't know about this trend, a couple of weeks ago, there was a TikTok trend where women asked their husbands and boyfriends and brothers about how often they think about the Roman Empire. And when I first saw this, it was framed as like a scientific fact about how men, on average, think about the Roman Empire once a day. And we are going to be discussing that and all of its connotations and all of the ripple effects of what this means for humanities and classics, and I'm sure a whole bunch of other things that I haven't even considered yet. So I think just to start off, Cosi, um, what are your initial thoughts on this whole
I'm,
trend?
I mean, for me, I feel like everyone that's on TikTok has quite a charged relationship with the app. So just like get that out of the way, that the app itself is quite draining and intense and quite gnarly in a way that other social media isn't. So that's like something to be very mindful of. But I mean, for me, and this is my naivete being loud, where it's like, for me as an ancient history person, as soon as you see the ancient world really breaking into the mainstream in that kind of way, and that everyone and all of these influencers that I follow because they have cute dogs or because they're funny or whatever, and they're talking about ancient Rome, you're like, oh my god, oh my god, this is fabulous, this is so amazing, I love it, I'm so excited about it. And then of course it kind of settles and you think a bit more, and a few other fun sort of tendrils unfurl about the trend. But initially my first response was being so excited because I was like, oh my god, everyone's thinking about ancient Rome, this is just like hilarious, like a really fun bit of PR for something that I'm really passionate about, but broadly is not necessarily super mainstream. So initially I was very excited by the trend. I thought it was really fun, and also like quite funny in the phrasing of like, how often do people think about ancient Rome? And it's just like, more than you think, more than you think. But of course, in the way that I'm phrasing it, I just said, how often do people think about ancient Rome, not how
Yes.
often do men think about ancient Rome. So that I think is probably the first fun point of contention for us, because I mean, I'm sure you saw this all over your For You page. So many ancient historians and archaeologists, like female archaeologists and ancient historians, were like, hi, knock knock, like we're here too.
Yeah,
What's
exactly.
up?
The first time I saw it, it was framed. I don't remember where I saw it. It was not a legitimate source, but it was framed as something that was like a scientific fact that men think about ancient
That's such
Rome
a
every
weird
single day.
angle. That is such a
Yeah.
weird angle.
Yeah, and and it blew up, and it went like, it kind of broke out of the TikTok or sphere of influence, if you will, and even had people like celebrities weighing
Yeah.
in on it. Like I think the one example was like Billy Ray Cyrus or something. It was like, yeah, I think about Rome like at least once a day. And I guess I wonder why that is, but also there's a lot of different ways that we can kind of crack this egg. We can talk about why that is, and why men in particular, or the kind of stereotype is men in particular. And we can also talk about how this affects like the academia side of this story, because it definitely does have an impact. Because I looked at some numbers, and maybe I'll share those in a little bit, but I looked at some numbers about like the demographic breakdown of classical historians and people who take these courses in university. But I think to start off, it's like, why is Rome and ancient Rome so much associated with men in the 21st century, I suppose? Like, because Rome really isn't, like, I think the kind of stereotype of Rome is very masculine. You think of Rome and you think of Russell Crowe and Gladiator, right? Like that is one of the main stereotypes. If you think of ancient Rome, you think of gladiators and manly things and Julius Caesar and politicians. But there's also like women and slaves and art and language and religion and all of these other things that I guess aren't traditionally masculine. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I feel like
That's a lot to throw at you.
I mean, it's a bang. I'm like, what are my thoughts? I feel like we just go back to a really interesting, but again, very broad discussion of, the gender binary and masculine and feminine. And every time you kind of go down that rabbit hole, I feel like that construction and that like binary construction falls apart so quickly. Like it's like you
Absolutely.
pull like you pull at three threads and it just falls over. I mean, when I was kind of thinking about hopping on this call and talking with you, the thing that came up for me, and again, I'm an ancient Greece baby, so that's like mainly my area, but there's something specific in that field where there's this weird understanding that you literally, I mean, when I was studying, you are explicitly taught that the Iliad is the one for the boys and the Odyssey is the one for the girls. And maybe they're not using, like for real,
Really?
seriously, maybe they're not using that exact language. But if you think about it, like the Iliad is the war one, right? Like it's the one
Right.
with the war and the blah and the whatever. And then
Men are doing manly things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But my point is like ancient Rome is the masculine one and ancient Greece is weirdly the more feminine one
Mm-hmm.
because it's a bit more creative or people were more drunk or it's less like whatever. But any kind of construction of that, as soon as you exert like a tiny shred of reflection,
Yes.
it falls apart again because it's like, okay, what, how are you trying to like quantify this or how are you trying to define this? Because there was cross-dressing in ancient Rome, like across the board. There was an incredibly complex construction of masculinity, and emotional expression was a hugely valuable thing that was rewarded like from men, like their grief, their weeping, all of this. So any kind of binary Rome is for the boys, it's like, well, how much do you know about ancient Rome if you are claiming that ancient Rome is validating any kind of archaic old school stuff about masculinity? It's like, I feel like you need to go back and read a bit more about it because again, it just collapses so quickly.
Or I think one thing that we're overlooking a little bit, and I just kind of thought of this now, is there is history in pop culture, how the general public perceives it, and then there is history as academics see it. So in pop culture, Greek mythology, you've got your Greek mythology girlies. I'll admit, I was one when I was younger. And
Still am.
then you have your dude bro philosophical, I really like Marcus Aurelius and I'm going to make him my Twitter profile picture and repost stoicism quotes. Like you kind of have these two, I don't want to say it's a solid side, but that is kind of how the ancient world has developed.
You're not making that up or even that's not remotely like an abstract claim from you. That is something that I have seen on TikTok every day since this trend has come out, which is like, what's the, ancient Roman, like, what's the Roman
What
Empire for
is your ancient
Greek,
Rome?
Greek mythology, Greek mythology, Greek mythology.
Yeah.
Like, I've seen like 40 versions of that where it's like, oh my God, what's the one for the girls? Yeah, it's Greek mythology. Like,
Yeah.
that weird binary classification is like so entrenched.
Which is like, I'm just going to come out and say it. It's stupid. It's
It's a bit
incredibly
absurd. It's a
stupid
bit
and
absurd.
reductive, I feel like, to, you know, people in general. Like, I don't
Mhm.
know.
Your reference to the gladiator is so important
Mhm.
because in the last 50, 60 years, the way that kind of modern times have plugged out or, picked out certain key points of the Roman Empire or the way that we conceive of the Roman Empire and then use that in film and in media to connect with people, it does mean that the Roman Empire that so many people are engaging with now is, I mean, it just looks quite different from the Roman Empire that is represented in the archaeology and the ancient texts. And that's something to
Yes.
just really clearly establish.
Well, I kind of touched on this earlier, but I feel like nowadays, like stoicism is something that I see a lot of young men gravitating to. And there's, I don't know enough about it to comment on it too much, but it seems that there's kind of two camps of the young men. One of them is a bit more extreme than the other. And then some of them are just, getting something really valuable out of these teachings. But then some people go on podcasts and things like that to kind of boil it down to its base elements, I suppose, without getting too deep into it.
Just something to bear in mind for us, right? Where it's like we're coming from a very privileged position of familiarity with the source material and
Mm-hmm.
the archaeology, which not every person has access to.
Yeah.
And
And that's
also,
why you exist, and that's why I exist.
that's why we're
Less
doing
so
it.
me with the classical stuff.
But I mean, from just bouncing off of what you were saying earlier, and like obviously we're talking about TikTok, and I just saw something from Esme, who runs Kinky History. She's an absolute rock star, and she was making the point that I made to you of that ancient Rome, there was cross dressing, there was, a huge amount of value put into like the emotional expression by men and all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, it's so funny that you're talking about stoicism and all of that because Honor, who is this incredible author, she wrote this book, Messalina, that's right there. She's an absolute superstar. And she put out a TikTok today where she explicitly says she's talking about when you're speaking to a guy from like a dating app or something and he tells you his favorite Roman emperor and whether it's like a green flag or a red flag, depending on literally depending on who. Incredible. She was dragging me in the comments. Um,
Amazing.
like flawless. But she made the point about Marcus Aurelius, and she puts him under green flag, and she's like, hold on, because if they've read him, like if they've read him properly, it holds up, it makes sense, blah blah blah. But of course, some of his fans are very problematic, and that to me is such a specific, fantastic example of exactly what you were saying, which is it's all about interpretation. It's all about
Yes.
how closely people are reading these texts and the meaning that they're taking out of them. Like that
Mm-hmm.
is just so important to understand because people can cherry pick whatever they want. People can just and massage it and finesse it and slap some PR on it, and it can look completely different at the other side of it. Completely different.
I think that word that you just used, interpretation, is the kind of linchpin here that kind of ties back to what I said about like
Yeah.
popular pop culture history versus academia, and interpretation is the linchpin that divides those. Is it a surface level interpretation where you have films like The Gladiator or Jason and the Argonauts, or is
Which is
it,
incredible, and I would
which
highly
is
recommend
still not to
everyone.
bash pop
So good.
culture. I love pop culture. I love, a shitty Roman movie. I love it. But there is also, the layers that we can peel back to
Yeah.
see and learn so much more. There's no question that this is a surface level interpretation of ancient Rome. And that's fine, question mark. But also, I also feel like I know I've seen this whole thing compared to girl dinner. Did you see all of that? Not
Dinner was
judging by your expression.
oh yeah, that was an interesting one.
So, for those that
Mm.
don't know, girl dinner is, well, it started out as basically, I'm too tired or I've had a really busy day. I'm just going to have like some crackers and some olives, or just like something from the pantry. It's going to be really simple. It's going to be a dried pack of ramen noodles. And I'll call this girl dinner. And there was a catchy song that was trending everywhere.
It was
But
so
there
fun
was,
for a
and
second.
it was fun, but there was a lot of kind of, I don't want to say controversy, but
There was a
people were
bit
very
that
critical
spicy. It got
of
spicy.
it.
It did.
Yes. And some people saw it as like the infantilization of adult women. I
But did
don't,
you see the eating disorder stuff? That was the stuff where I was like, oh damn.
and then
Oh,
yeah, there was a whole other
glamorizing
aspect
eating
with like
disorders.
eating disorders. So maybe it's not a great comparison, but I also do think like it's coming from like the same place. Like it's whether it's Roman history or, you know, it's girls can't like Roman history,
Well,
obviously.
I
It's
think exactly what you're saying, which is like something on TikTok, and TikTok is such a frivolous app.
yes,
And
yes,
something starts out as so lighthearted, frivolous,
innocuous.
fun,
Yeah.
silly, innocuous, exactly. But then what becomes clear after it's been on the internet for a week, it's kind of like, the stuff sort of starts crawling out of the swamp. And then you're
Yes.
like, oh God, when we actually think about it, this is kind of not necessarily super straightforward or 100% great. Where it's like,
Yeah.
how often do men think about the Roman Empire? It's like, well, that's an interesting way of phrasing that question.
Yeah, it's exactly like you said, you start peeling back those layers and you're like,
Oh, oh.
oh,
And then you love the audio. And it's exactly me. At first, I was like, oh my God, everyone's talking about ancient Rome. And then I'm like, why are they
oh,
asking like women or non-binary people how they feel about
yeah,
ancient Rome?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
wait, what? Why do men think about Rome so much? Why?
This I think because I think Stoicism is really popular among men
Popping
right
off.
now,
Popping off. It's
specifically.
Jordan Peterson, next wave. You're like,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
Andrew Tate's in jail. What's next?
yeah. And then I think also a lot of Roman movies and like pop culture things, like whether it's HBO's Rome or it's
Mm.
all made for a traditionally male demographic. But this is a great time to throw out my statistic that I found. According to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, as of 2015, women earned 61% of all master's and professional practice degrees in the humanities and 54% of the doctoral degrees in the field. I'll put a link in the description to my source for this. So, humanities is generally where history and specifically classics fall. A question for you now. What was, like, thinking back to your bachelor's degree, what was roughly like the division between men, women, and non-binary people in your classes, if you remember?
I'm thinking about my honors classes, which were ancient world studies, and
Mm.
I would hazard a guess that it was about two-thirds women and
Mm-hmm.
one-third men, with like a handful of, gender non-conforming people, but not a huge amount. And also, of course, my class was tiny,
Right.
obviously.
What about your professors? Would you say that there was more?
More men than women,
Interesting.
unsurprisingly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it?
Well,
Is
that's
it?
that's almost a whole other topic.
Yeah. Yeah. Are we surprised?
Yeah.
The point that what does this say for women who are really interested in ancient Rome? And what does this mean for them? And is this, in a way, kind of precluding women and non binary people from feeling as like, because so much of this and so much of what we talk about as far as accessibility and all of that is about people feeling like this is a space for them and people feeling like this is stuff that they can connect with and stuff that they have a right to. And so, does a trend like this contribute to the alienation of some people from the field of ancient Rome as like a specialty?
I mean, I think there's already a lot of barriers for studying the classics. I think like class disparity and wealth is a really big one. I don't think that this is going to this trend is going to have an impact on those numbers that I talked about earlier about, you know, women primarily being the main demographic in the humanities. I don't think that will. But it also just might make people feel worse about themselves about doing that too, because I have a story and it's a really, really awful one. I had a gentleman suitor who I was not interested at all. And I was in my second year of university and we went for coffee and he boiled my entire academic career up to that point down quite a bit. And he basically said, like, we were talking about ancient Rome, because I also had a specialty in ancient Rome. And he was basically very dismissive of my education and believed that he knew more about this topic because he had watched a lot of documentaries. And that was something that he straight up said to me was, I know a lot about this, more than you can ever learn in an academic setting. And I was like, I was already not interested in you, and this is like beyond. So that's a story that I have.
Stop that. That's anecdotal evidence. God
yes.
damn.
To this, it's been like 10 years, and like I'm still just like, the fucking audacity of this bitch. Like,
it's like, I wish we were surprised. I wish I was like floored, but I'm just not. And this is where I think a trend like this is so interesting for what we're talking about, because on the one hand, it's fabulous in that it shows that ancient history in the ancient world is, you know, still very relevant and looms very large for a lot of people.
Yes.
And it's something, you know, like, is something that is very,
that's like the silver lining through this.
And that's fabulous. Oh my God, everyone's thinking, like, a whole bunch of people are thinking about ancient Rome. That's gorgeous. But if you're thinking about ancient Rome as like an abstract ideal, and an ideal that has been abstracted and manipulated over the past hundreds of years, because that's what happens. That's how history works. Welcome to the show. You know, that's just how it happens. It all changes and evolves and kind of gets massaged for particular purposes. But if you kind of hold all of that together, which is like, a lot of people are thinking about this is something that is clearly, you know, serving a particular social purpose. And then on top of that, you add the other layer, which is about, you know, the Marcus Aurelius fans and the people that watch a few documentaries and use that as a way of feeling like they're incredibly informed about the ancient world, and then to use that in a sort of legitimizing way, or as a jumping off point, or something which is like using it for a horrible purpose. And this guy just sounds like a sexist prick. And so then hearing that he was a sexist prick who was using ancient Rome as kind of this bludgeoning thing because he'd seen a few documentaries, that's like such powerful anecdotal evidence of what this trend, what the kind of dark side of this TikTok trend is, you know. Yes. Where you're just like, oh, like, I want to be super into it and be like watching these fun videos and be like, oh my God, all of these people are thinking about ancient Rome. And then you hear a story like that and you're like, oh, this is why 10% of me is just getting kind of icked out by the whole thing. It's a bit like, oh no.
Yeah. It's something else, that's for sure.
Well, I love that we're talking about it. Like, it's fascinating. If nothing else,
absolutely.
It's compelling. And
there's a reason why I saw this trend and I was like, I think I know who I want to talk to about this.
Let's scream about TikTok and gender, please.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that would be my main takeaway, is like, can someone keep working on really fun ancient Rome content where people are learning and feeling engaged with it in a way that isn't all like, yes, back when men were men, and that's why you should care about ancient Rome. It's like, no, there are other reasons why ancient Rome is
Yes.
cool. It's not just like, it's not just about the crisis of masculinity that's happening right now. Like, maybe that's the hook. I get why that's the hook, but I promise there's like interesting stuff in
Yes.
here that's like separate from that. I promise.
Something that I just kind of thought about is that right now we have a ton of really popular and well-known classical historians, and a lot of them are women. Like if I
Yeah.
was to name like a famous classicist off the cuff, Mary Beard.
And what's her area? What's her area? Ancient Rome. That
Freaking
is her
ancient
area.
Rome. Yeah. Again, it's been a long time since I've been like fully entrenched in classics. So I'm not up to date with,
Mm-hmm.
the who's who of
Who's
academics,
who
but
in
like
Zoo?
to me, she is the Roman historian
Oh yeah,
of our
yeah,
generation, at least, or at least
yeah,
right now.
yeah.
And Natalie Haynes is also another great example of just like somebody who is doing really digestible work that, as you said, doesn't stray too far from the original material, but
Mm-hmm.
still kind of puts it into a very well written and digestible format.
I completely agree, and I think the more we can foreground people in the space that are doing work like that,
Mm-hmm.
that I think is the priority. And just being like, okay, if you think about ancient Rome once a day, why don't you read Mary Beard? She's amazing.
Yeah. Or
You know,
she also has tons of documentaries that are like for free on YouTube. So,
incredible.
but this was really, really wonderful to have you on the channel again. I'm really glad that we were able to do this. I think our last video was like 6 months ago. So,
Oh my
and we're
God, yeah.
both in like very different positions in our lives now. Because I think we recorded that before I lost my job. So it
Yes.
was really, really awesome to reconnect with you in this way and to have you on the channel to talk about this. Because again, you were my first impulse to go to for this because this is a really interesting topic and there's a lot to talk about with it. I'm sure there will be lots of much bigger video essays on this topic on YouTube, but I just wanted this to be more of a casual chat. So
Yeah.
thank you, Cosi, for coming on the channel again. It's always lovely to have you. And I hope that to everyone watching, you have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. Video done.